that Florida State meeting, Craig, just going back to what we mentioned, we're going to get to Mickey Spagnuolo in a moment, but yeah, this is like laying down the gauntlet. Now, what they do with it, we've reached a crossroads in our relationship with the ACC. This board is left with no choice but to challenge the grant of rights. It's one thing to say it. It's another thing legally to do it. But it's draconian was the word that used by Peter Collins on the grant of rights that they are hooked into with the ACC.
Yeah, well, I mean, trying to parse through some of these tweets here. I mean, we're sitting there talking to Zach while this is all going on, so we didn't get to hear it live. I tried to listen in during the commercial as best I could, and it was about 15, 20 minutes of just straight talking and rolling through a bunch of different bullet points, including the fact that we now know what the buyout number would be to get out of the ACC, and that number is $572 million.
Right.
That was the number put out there on the FSU Board of Trustees video about what it would take. They're going through their complaint, and it said that they will vote on filing today to challenge the ACC grant of rights. So, yes, they are, in fact, going to challenge, saying that they'd been left with no choice but to challenge the legitimacy of the grant of rights and its severe withdrawal penalties, which does include over $500 million in direct fees, and what also includes lost revenues that they would be leaving. And so, the buzzwords are crossroads, withdrawal penalties, legitimacy, challenge. Those are all kind of in that word salad of the various things that have been said so far, but all are words that tell you kind of what the vibe is, right? And so there's some other bullet points that he went over. They had a chart that was up there showing the way that the buyout escalated, and it's pretty significant. It was, but a few years ago where there was little to no penalty.
Like
and now,
$21 million or $12 million. Yeah.
Now here it is. It's $572 million. So it skyrocketed. There's also, and this is part of needing to be able to hear it and sort through it a little bit, but there was talk about how the contract. Let's see. Here's one part from Nicole Auerbach. FSU lawyer states the ACC told members in 2016 that there was an ultimatum from ESPN that the network would not enter into any future media rights deals with the league, and which forced members to extend their grant of rights through 2036. Lawyer also said that ESPN has a unilateral right to exercise a 9-year option to extend its media deal with the ACC from 2027 through 2036, which it has not done yet. And so what that means is that because they haven't done that yet, there is no guaranteed media rights, according to this lawyer, past 2027 for the ACC. So that seems pretty significant when you're talking about how, they're linked up to 2036, and how could they ever get out of that? But there's nothing past 2027, which is just 4 years away, that guarantees them anything from the ESPN side of things. And also saying that Jim Phillips signed the amendment in 2021 that gives ESPN until February of 2025, so 2 years from now, to decide if it wants to extend its contract with the ACC beyond 2027. So you hear that, and that certainly changes the story a bit from where you're going, there's nothing until 2036. Well, there's nothing money-wise guaranteed past 2027, so that puts things in a little bit more perspective on why this is a bit more imminent, or why this is a bit more closer, train coming down the tracks than it appears it was before today's meeting.
Remember 2027, you brought that up. Why that? Is that time when the ESPN can have that look at their contract with the ACC? Is that kind of what I was told by a source within the Collegiate Athletics Administration? Is that the possibility? I don't know.
Well, I think it would clearly be that, given that they just said that there's nothing guaranteed past 2027.
And that's something that we've asked people, some of the great writers, even Dan Wetzel among others, and they did not know that or had not heard that. But that's something I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, not because it was me. Someone told me that, and I was like, whoa, that's a one-way street.
Yeah, it says the FSU lawyer said that they, again, exercised the ESPN has a unilateral right to exercise a 9-year option in, that would be the 2027 to 2036 option, but it has not done that yet. So because they have not done that yet, ESPN, there's nothing for the ACC guaranteed past 2027 when it comes to revenue. So that's the gist of that. He also mentioned the ultimatum from ESPN about not entering into any future media rights deals unless they had originally agreed to extend that grant of rights through 2036. Also, the attorney, David Ashburn, said as well that the media rights contract with the ACC and ESPN required them to have a minimum of 15 members, so that's why you saw them scatter, real quickly and throw that net over Cal, Stanford, and SMU to bring them into the fold so that they did remain at that minimum threshold. So, yeah, that's from various reporters, some of that from Nicole Auerbach, some of that from Ross Dellinger, Brandon Marcello, all the usual suspects. But, yeah, David Ashburn's asking for, or David C. Ashburn, asking for permission to file a complaint from the Board of Trustees that would challenge the withdrawal penalties, including that big $572 million figure, and the legal arguments, restraint of trade, unenforceable withdrawal penalties, so they're saying they can't really enforce that, breach of contract, and violation of public policy. Those are the big bullet points that he hit on as far as what they see as being areas that they could challenge when it comes to this. So a lot to unpack from that, and I don't know if he's still talking at this point or not, but there's a lot of information in there to try and sort through. But, they've got their ducks in a row. Clearly, they've got their plan of attack and pointing out some of those areas that I just mentioned, and they've obviously got a big reason to want to challenge that because they don't want to be in that league, and they sure as hell don't want to pay $572 million. I know the Saudis could pay that and not even lose sleep over it, but I don't know, man. That's a whole heck of a lot of money, no matter what kind of a business arrangement you're in. That's something that's just you got.
You could even settle half of that. That's still a massive chunk. That's three times more than what Texas and Oklahoma ended up spending to get out of the Big 12 a year early, much less that much earlier. Also, a couple of the notes they made. Listen, it's a travesty about what happened to Florida State 2 weeks ago. Our actions today are less about the events the last couple of weeks and far more about the actions of the ACC leadership over the last 10 years and what confronts the ACC over the next 13. One thing that sometimes fans don't understand is the grant of rights is not between the ESPN and the teams within the ACC. The grant of rights is with the conference. And underneath of that umbrella, of course, are the teams, whatever conference it might be. So FSU, I don't think their deal is not with ESPN because this is not ESPN and Florida State are not connected here when it comes to the grant of rights. It's with the conference and not with the teams within the conference, even though, again, that's part of the clump.
And one of their big arguments, too, is basically the ACC hasn't done their job. I saw this from Mitt Winter as far as the multiple causes of action that's in this complaint. They're saying the grant of rights and the ACC withdrawal fees violate antitrust law in Florida. They're saying the grant of rights and withdrawal fees are unenforceable. They are claiming breach of contract, breach of fiduciary duty, and unconscionability and violation of public policy. And so basically one of the arguments here as far as the breach of fiduciary duty, I guess, goes back to just the negotiations with ESPN and the fact that the ACC did not create an appropriate, I guess, value for their media rights. And so they got shortchanged there. And, that's a lot of the various things that have been brought up by David C. Ashburn in this Zoom meeting with the Board of Regents, and now his request to go ahead and pursue this further, legal action versus the ACC. So he's laid out his case, and we'll see what goes on from here.
Ross Dellinger, again, you mentioned David C. Ashburn, ESPN, that unilateral. This is what was said a couple of weeks ago when I was told, and I was told by somebody within the business, the industry, there aren't a lot of people that even know that exist. And I remember when I said that, and I mentioned to a couple of national writers, I said, we asked Dan Wetzel yesterday that there was this one-way street, not only the grant of rights through 2036, not only the buyout clause or what it would cost the exit fees, but also that the network had a chance to say, I think what we're going to do in 2027, boom, it's a one-way street, and everybody has to live with it. So FSU has put their case out there. Now, what is next? $572 million is what it would cost, at least for now. And about 15 or so 10 years ago, it was about $21 million. So
yeah, that's
there
part
we
of
are with that. We have Mickey Spagnuolo in a moment. Then we're going to get to John Kurtz on K-State a little after 10 o'clock.
As part of their argument, I guess, against this, basically being unfair or unenforceable is pointing to the fact of what a skyrocketing jump in money that potential out took from being $20 million, not too long ago to now being $572 million to be able to get out. So, again, they've laid out a lot of points that some were brought up beforehand, some that are now a little bit more clarified, but now asking for Board of Regents approval. And once that's given, I guess here in the next few minutes or however that works, then they will go and pursue and they will go file that I guess you'd call it a complaint or whatnot, but they'll go ahead and start the legal process of challenging the grant of rights. So yep. Florida State's doing what many expected them to do, and we'll see how successful they are. But a lot of people on pins and needles will be watching this, because if they're successful, then that opens the door for everybody and across the country with a grant of rights, but particularly the ACC schools. So yeah, it's fascinating.
Alan Williams, why did they sign it? Why? My question is, if your grant of rights was so awful, violated all these antitrust rules, why did you do it in the first place? And that's a question that even Paul, an FSU alum, has brought up. They weren't in really much of a position because they needed to get an extension. They needed to have that deal. And pretty much everybody that was at Florida State at the time, I believe from the president to whoever else, the AD, et cetera, they're not even a part of FSU right now. Kalani, FSU saying they cannot afford the exit fee in the Board of Trustees meeting right now. The lawyers and the exit fee is not workable or viable path. We've just been saying that. So, but we appreciate you putting that in the chat. But wow, Paxton asked this question. Did Brett McMurphy just say, no, Zach Barnett just say that at some point there won't even be academics as a part of all this? Yeah, that's exactly what he mentioned, because there are sometimes thoughts right now, even though everybody's pretty much trying to stay within that, I guess you could say, that what you're supposed to be about, but you wonder if that's slipping too, that it is such a pay for sport, pay for play, that's all that matters is football or men's basketball, that eventually that doesn't even become a part of college football. I hope to God it never gets to that point, but I also never thought that would get to the point we are right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be somewhat suicidal for a lot of the sport out there if you sit there and try to make it now suddenly about just the money aspect of this, which, some could argue that's sort of been the way it's trending for a while now. But this would lead to what, when you hear the big break off or things like that, that could be what this is all right, you want to go be a semi-pro minor league NFL team, Florida State, you go join up the schools that want to do that. But the Big Ten's not going to stop with academics. Like the Big Ten's not going to suddenly stop caring about school. I don't believe that for a second. I don't believe a lot of the schools in the ACC want to do that. I don't think there's a lot of schools across America that are interested in doing that. So, have that at SEC, I guess. But, I mean, I don't know. I think Texas is still pretty strong in academics, and that's going to matter to them. So
sure it is. Yeah.
That's a bigger mess that's going to have to be sorted through. But there is a school of thought of, you basically eliminate the school part. You, lease out your brand, your Florida State brand, and your minor league team, and that's been one element of this discussion that I've never really latched onto, because again, what's the point? It's the XFL at that point, but I guess shinier and with better talent in some cases. But that's where I could see there being a rift that's unrecoverable, or that some fans won't be able to overcome if you suddenly just split from the schools or the academics entirely.
I think even the most passionate college football bases, university fan bases, would still go, wait a minute. Alan Williams, isn't the bottom line of college athletics, the end of the day, the mission statement to educate young men and women? Guess it's turned into the NFL minor leagues. That's exactly, Alan, what we said. We do need to break. Go ahead and finish it out, Craig, then we come to Mickey Spagnuolo on the Cowboys game this weekend in Miami.
Well, I wanted to mention something that Bob, and you're right. That's exactly. I mean, that's the big conversation right now. Is like, what are we doing? Where is this going? And what is this supposed to be in the long run? But again, that's a deeper conversation that's going to have to play out some more. But we just saw Bob Thompson in response to Nicole Auerbach, who was talking about the ESPN unilateral rights, that 9-year option to extend its deal from 27 to 36, which it hasn't done. And the fact that they haven't done that means there's no guaranteed media for the SEC or for the ACC beyond 2027. That was an amendment in 2021 that gives ESPN until February of 2025 to decide if it wants to extend its contract beyond 2027. So I don't know if I mentioned that part specifically.
Yes.
But Bob Thompson, in response to that, said that he can't believe that the ACC agreed to that clause, and that they must have just really wanted the ACC network so badly that they agreed to that. But that looks like it could be something that costs them dearly in the long run, and certainly it's being brought up as a big point of contention today. So,
and something we mentioned a couple of weeks ago that everyone was like, huh? And Bob even said that to us yesterday. Yeah. He can't believe that they would do that, and we now know they did. They did. All right, when we come back,